Welcome to PlotLines, where we'll use our over 30 years of experience in real estate communications to uncover the real stories behind real estate. I'm Heather Crowell.
And I'm Britni Acriveau. Dive in with us as we invite guests to break down the ever-changing landscapes of real estate together. All right, welcome back to PlotLines. Today we have Kaitlin McCarthy, the founder and CEO of Ionic Development. Kaitlin, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so we're excited to dive in. Why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company and your journey into real estate?
Sure. I'm the founder and CEO of Ionic Development Company, Boston-based real estate development and consulting firm. We work on various types of projects from life science to multifamily and from different roles from the developer to a consultant. And we've played kind of flexible roles on projects. My background actually started with a love for architecture that brought me into civil engineering and then through construction management. While I was in construction management, I decided I wanted to be earlier on in the process. So I actually then got my MBA to complement those hard engineering skills. And then after my MBA, I came into development and have been in the world ever since on the side. And so it's been a really great opportunity to put together both the technical and business skills. And I just love getting to see projects come to life every day.
Awesome.
That sounds fun. Okay, well, so the nature of our show is breaking down the headlines in the real estate space. So we'll start with a few of the headlines we're seeing, and then you can let us know if that's similar to what you're seeing, feeling, or if you have a different take. So a couple of the headlines we're seeing recently are, the three top factors for successful master plan communities are timing, timing, and timing. And that it's a mixed bag for lab leasing. You said you did some life sciences. So what are you seeing? What are you working on just tell us if these are accurate or if you have a different take on them.
Sure. It's always a conversation about supply and demand, and naturally those are constantly in flux.
Yep.
Right now, we're really focused on multifamily. As we all know, there's a housing crisis everywhere in the country. And so we're looking in both big and small scales, how we can build more housing. It's requiring creative thinking given the current interest rate environment as well as the cost of construction. So we've been really collaborating with colleagues and team members to try to think of creative ways to get more housing in the pipeline.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we know that you touch on a lot of different sectors, though. What else are you focused on outside of multifamily?
We've done life science projects, and we actually just finished an office project in Worcester, which is a little bit surprising to hear office these days, although I think a lot of us are seeing that office isn't dead, it's just being reinvented. We're generally across asset classes seeing a mix of uses, and hence the term mixed use. People are looking for variety in their day-to-day lives. People are no longer looking to have, this is my home and I drive an hour, and this is my work and then I drive home. We're seeing a mix of actually hospitality into office spaces. We've actually looked at hiring hospitality designers to come into office spaces to make it feel more of that hotel lobby with the energies so that you can work together. Even within an office, you're seeing people, they don't want to just work in one place all day. They want to move around depending on what their activity is. Are they taking a meeting? Is it a collaboration session? And so we're seeing a lot of mix within kind of an office space. We're also seeing a lot of experiential retail coming up, and that's really helping to pull people out of their day-to-day lives, come experience, and then experiential retail also helps to make people hungry. So it really bodes well for creating a place where people want to come and stay a while. And then we're also seeing a real focus on third spaces, and even places like gyms are starting to create areas where people can co-work out of. And this allows people the flexibility to work their life into work and vice versa. And so if it makes it easier to go to the gym, if you can then take a meeting in a space right from your gym, that makes your life a more seamless experience. And so these third spaces where it's not your office, it's not your home, but it's a place where you can be around other people, share ideas, and hopefully be productive.
Yeah. No, that's
third spaces. I don't think we've heard that
I know,
term
it's
yet.
a
I
new-
like that
new
one.
term. I like it.
Yeah.
And it is all about convenience. So in the mixed use environment, there's a lot of different audiences, a lot of different demands. How are developers balancing sort of the different uses and needs of the tenants that are occupying the spaces now that they're all blending together?
Yes, flexibility is important, designing spaces that can be flex both on a more permanent basis, depending on who the tenant is going to be, but also once the tenant is in there, how can they move the space and make it flexible depending on their own needs? You see this a lot with moving bigger meeting rooms to be able to be divided into smaller meeting rooms or breakout spaces. And so it's allowing for that type of flexibility. I think it's also important to have all of people representing all these different uses at the table early on to help think of these ideas. And you'll never have the exact need that to meet everybody, but if you can bring people together and think of creative ways that spaces can serve different needs, one of the ways we see this a lot is within offices or within buildings within a city. You can have a room that's dedicated to the office space during the day, but then open to the community at night. And having that flexibility, even down to the level of furniture, to making sure it can be moved and stacked in the corner or in a storage space, is really allowing for these creative, flexible uses.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So I know you had already mentioned material costs, things like that. What are other things that are on the radar for developers? Labor shortages, we hear a lot about that. What's sort of top of mind for you, and how are developers like yourself adjusting strategies to still deliver projects on time and on budget and all of that?
There's two approaches. One is the technical and technology approach. So how can we from a actual construction standpoint, whether that be prefabrication or modularization, find efficiencies? There's also AI tools. Of course, it wouldn't be a chat about construction in 2025 if we didn't mention AI that are helping to streamline the supply chain. I think next you have to think about the collaboration. And I really believe in bringing team members on early when design decisions are just starting to be made, because it's so hard to make changes later on. So having your general contractor and even the key subcontractors at the table early on can help you to make decisions based on their real-time feedback. They're the ones that are actually ordering the equipment and seeing where there might be problems in the future. It's super easy to make those changes early on in the design process and much more costly and time impactful later on in the process. So if you can bring people to the table earlier to be a part of the design process, you can make a lot of those decisions earlier on. I think the third part of it is really locking in your contracts early. That speaks a little bit to bringing people to the table early on. But as soon as you can order something, especially if it's coming from overseas, order it and store it here. Or as soon as you can lock in the pricing of a commodity or any of these items that have potential for volatility in the future, we're trying to lock those in as early as possible to help mitigate the downstream changes.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So switching gears a little bit, you're in Boston, which is where I went to school, but Boston is very well known for the life sciences development and is, one of the top hubs for life sciences. What are you seeing there? I know, there was a lot of building for a while and then it slowed a little bit. What are you, I'm hearing that it's kind of breaking out again. What are you seeing there? What are you hearing? What's the development market like for life sciences these days?
Two different ways of looking at it. I think the first one is for the buildings that have already been built, and we're definitely seeing smaller life science tenants take those. It's going to be rare right now to find your anchor tenant, although it is happening in specific places, but really making sure your building can be outfitted for those smaller tenants. And then if we think about the future of life science, the next wave of buildings, We've been working with architects to understand how automation and AI are going to change that. So in the life sciences world, they're trying to think about how they can use robotics and automation to help make their processes more efficient. What that means is when you're designing lab tables, they need to be designed specifically for those robotics to be used.
Mm.
And that's everything from ceiling height to how close together the lab benches are and whether there's room for the robots and sliding infrastructure. And so I think that as the technology evolves, that's going to impact the new life science buildings. And so when we start to see the next wave come about, that's really needs to be a consideration up front.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, we know AI is so buzzworthy. Obviously, tech and
Yes.
innovation. What about green building and sustainability? How much is that factoring into decisions that you're making for new projects?
Huge. And Boston and Massachusetts are at the forefront of green and sustainable building.
Okay.
We have net zero energy is a requirement now.
Mm.
No fossil fuels in the city of Boston. Our energy code is called Stretch Energy Code because it actually goes beyond what the energy code requires.
Okay.
And so we're constantly thinking about how to incorporate those into buildings. I remember that when Passive House became popular a couple years ago, there was sort of this fear about how much cost it would add. And then by now it's actually just become absorbed in the market and everything in the city of Boston is being built to a Passive House standard. So once the subcontractors got familiar with what that meant and what that required, we were actually able to absorb it as just part of normal practices. And it's not really thought of anymore as sort of a hurdle to get over.
Okay.
But we're constantly thinking about how we can continue to be ahead of the game with green practices, looking at things like carbon neutral cement or other types of materials that are carbon neutral because now embodied carbon has become a consideration. And so we're in a place that it's required for us to constantly be thinking about pushing the envelope.
Sure.
And that's great because we get to try new things and new technologies. And at the end of the day, it makes for a better building and a better experience for the tenants. So it does help us push the envelope.
Yeah. No, could be a model for other cities in the country. Talk to us a little bit about the office space. I know you just said you just developed an office building, I think, in Worcester. Tell us a little bit about that. Was it build to suit? Like what are you seeing in the office market? Some cities are rebounding, some are not. But we're definitely not hearing about new development. So curious what
This was this was a smaller historical renovation building.
Okay.
The footprint was only about 10,000 square feet. So it wasn't a huge office building, but the tenant is Work Bar, which is a local co-working company.
Okay.
Really great model, really great flexible options for small companies. We actually also sit in a Work Bar, so it was really great for us to experience building out a new Work Bar. And so that was a built to suit scenario. Worcester was a market that was on their radar and has a lot going on in terms of innovation space. So it really made sense for them to go there. As far as the larger offices, I think you're more seeing rework of existing space versus new buildings being built. In Boston, we're really catching up to the other cities as far as returning to work, but you have to make people want to be there. So there's a lot of money being put into amenities and experiences and making that more seamless life. So making sure that things as little as there actually is a really decent coffee shop, whether it's within your own space or within the building, for people to have meetings and collaborate, making sure that you're starting to see sort of exclusive club amenities within buildings where you can only access them if you're a tenant of the building. That's another draw where if you want to meet a friend for drinks after work or a colleague, then you can bring them into this space that's exclusive to you and it's a nice experience. And so it's really thinking about how to make the commute worth it, right? And
sure.
And there are still some challenges. I think one thing that we have yet to figure out of an industry is with the Zoom meetings, how to like what's the space between your cubicle and the telephone booth where you feel a little claustrophobic. Right. So how are we approaching that? I think still needs to be figured out. And then in thinking about how people like to move around and are there soundproof spaces, and just making sure that people don't feel tethered to one place. I think the other thing people are trying to figure out is hoteling. And if you aren't in a situation where people are coming 5 days a week, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have a dedicated desk. But what does that mean as far as efficiency of the user? Are there monitors there for you? Are there lockers where people can store things? So it's the pendulum has swung totally to you don't have a dedicated space, but where do we find something in the middle to make people as productive and comfortable as they can when they're at the office?
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. But we've covered a lot of things as far as what makes sort of a successful mixed use project. But is there anything we haven't covered yet, whether it's, being in an urban versus suburban environment, or what else are you seeing factors that should be considered in 2025 for the most successful mixed use development?
Outdoor space, both within the buildings, are there opportunities for balconies, but also when people are outside, are there areas for them to set up and enjoy the outdoors? It's a little bit counterintuitive being in Boston, but I actually think it makes it even more important to consider the outdoors. And in every type of building. And it doesn't mean you need a pool in your residential building, but is there a space where people can sit out and soak up the sun in those few precious days? And so thinking about how to really use those spaces so that they're welcoming and meet the needs. If you're next to an office building, are there places for people to meet outside for lunch? Are there walking pathways? This is one of the sustainable strategies, is to make sure there's walking pathways within a certain distance of the building. And so really thinking about how to get people outside and make sure they're enjoying the outside. And if it's windy, making sure you have windscreens. So things like that to make sure that they could really take advantage of that on the few nice days.
Yeah. What about like events or activations at these spaces? Is that anything that you're considering as you develop? Like, I mean, the outdoor space surely could be used for things like that, but are we
allocating specific spaces toward hosting events?
Yeah,
definitely. There's the obvious opportunity for weddings, et cetera, which could be revenue generating, but also making sure that there's opportunities for the communities to use it, whether it's an amphitheater type setup, or a place that we had a concept for a project that had actually an arboretum in it, where people could come learn and learn about local plantings and plantings from around the world. And not only just a nice place to be in, but a place that could be used for educational purposes as well.
Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah. All right. So before we wrap up, I guess I have a question, which is, from your perspective, you deal with a lot of different sectors. Which sector, from the perspective of architecture, development, engineering, what's the most interesting, like where you get to have the most fun, I guess?
I think housing, not only because it's such a need right now, but to be able to provide that need from people, and everybody experiences housing, right?
Yeah,
and so to think about how you can create a space that suits the need for a wide set of people, and you can imagine yourself living there. I think also there's certain things. It's one of the places where it's so important to have a diverse set of people at the table, because you're trying to design the best design for everybody. And so I think from both a standpoint of just thinking about what it would be like to live there, but also taking into account all the different viewpoints of people who will live there and working with them to understand what they really need in housing. And then just providing this space for people to live in, which is such a need right now.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Great.
It's very personal.
All right. Well, it's time to sort of circle back to the first question Heather asked you, which was about your take on headlines in the space. And so now we want to give you the opportunity to write your ideal headline for the mixed use sector. What would that look like if you could write your own?
We're on the cusp of a renaissance of mixed use,
Mhm.
how we're incorporating experiences and the human experience into everything we do.
Yeah.
I like
Awesome.
it. Yeah,
That
that's
makes
great.
total sense. I mean, and you covered off in a lot of sectors and their transformation and opportunities. So glad to hear that there is a
Right.
renaissance
And the
happening.
thoughtful integration of all of
Yeah.
the uses is great. Yeah.
All right. Well, Kaitlin, is there anything we haven't covered that you think our listeners should know?
I would just say that we should take this opportunity of a reset in the market to really think about how we want to approach development going forward and
Mhm.
think about ways to challenge the assumptions that might have been made to date and are
Okay.
hard to challenge when things are rocking and rolling, and think about how we can make meaningful, thoughtful change as we develop going forward.
Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it and enjoyed your insights on the market.
Thank you guys.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts